Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Sonia.
Carrie, we get asked a lot about cookbooks. I think people still struggle with figuring out which cookbooks they really need to have in their collection, which cookbooks are reliable, what do we reach for and when. I just feel like we all want to know.
Yeah, I also think it's really personal because my mom didn't use cookbooks in the way that people use cookbooks these days. We had a lot of these regional cookbooks that were almost bound. It was like a pack of recipes.
Spiral bound, yeah.
Spiral bound, some of my mom's recipes and her friends' recipes. And also my grandmother had recipe cards. And so when you asked her for a recipe, she would take out a card and she would, in her beautiful script handwriting, write the recipe out for you.
But naturally, some of those recipes came from somewhere, and sometimes they came from cookbooks. And I think what I love about having these conversations with you is actually falling back in love with my cookbooks. I think it's really easy to rely on the internet, but the truth is not every recipe is on the internet. I'm less of a recipe follower than you in general, which is why I always love discovering recipes from you because you actually make them. For me, cookbooks are often really for inspiration, for research, for guidance, for storytelling. And I think that's the other part of this conversation. We're going to talk about why we care about these books beyond just the recipes. And of course, the recipes are important.
Yes, it helps to go back if you've used a cookbook and realize how much you've learned from that cookbook.
So let's get into it. You and I came up with a couple different categories. The first category is what is our favorite cookbook for weeknight cooking or everyday cooking, something we're reaching for those staples that you come back to again and again. I have to say this choice was inspired by our conversation with Sue Lee, who really was advocating for the cookbooks written by Amy Chaplin, who's a Whole Foods chef, and she had a restaurant in New York. And I had checked out her books from the library before, but it was Sue Lee in my head that really got me to buy one of them. And so I have totally fallen in love with Amy Chaplin's Whole Food Cooking Every Day. It's her second cookbook. It won a James Beard Award. Her first cookbook also won a James Beard Award. I love this book because it has some staples that now I'm just incorporating into my everyday life. I've already talked to you about the Bircher bowl, which is this kind of like chia, almond, grain bowl. So there's a lot of cool breakfast ideas. And the way she divides the book is by different kinds of sections. So she has breakfast, but she also has a whole chapter on just steamed vegetables. And in that chapter, there's a chart on how to steam different vegetables, how to combine them with different flavors. So there's like charts in every single section. There's a section just on beans and against whole foods. So this just means whole ingredients. And it's all vegetarian, which I also kind of love because I love vegetable ideas.
Well, Sonia, I had never heard of Amy Chaplin until we talked to Sue Lee, and I kind of forgot about that recommendation. And I think this is the way that we also discover these ideas and these writers and these methods from other cooks.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight some of the things that have become favorites. So there's this really simple but delicious leftover steamed vegetable miso bowl. She has a ton of really interesting salad dressings. You know how much we love salads. There's ones like a fennel citrus salad dressing, a sweet corn salad dressing. It's very interesting, very unusual. Yeah. She has a great French lentil tomato bake. That's the kind of dish I'm always making at home. There's a really lovely recipe for seeded crackers. And then there's just a bunch of deceptively simple soups. So there's an incredible winter squash soup recipe. There's a lovely parsnip soup recipe. There's also a great cauliflower soup. And then like 4 different variations on the cauliflower soup. You and I make cauliflower soup every year, but it's fun to just tweak it ever so slightly each time.
Well, I think that's what you get with good writing. You know, these ideas and these methods that seem very simple or that are almost too simple to even write down, When your cauliflower soup is mediocre and then you suddenly follow someone's recipe and it's outstanding, that's where you can really learn how to be a better cook.
So, Carrie, what's one of your favorite everyday, weeknight, friendly cookbooks?
So, Sonia, this is a book actually that used to sit on the counter at my first client's house. It's called Vegetables Every Day by Jack Bishop. And there are no pictures, which is really different from a lot of the cookbooks that are being produced today. What I like about this book is that it's alphabetical by each vegetable. So if you have broccoli in your fridge, you can just look at the B's, and in that section, it will tell you nutrition information, seasonal availability, how to select the freshest version of whatever vegetable that you have or that you're interested in, and then several recipes that describe how to cook with this vegetable. And so there's simple recipes like how to steam broccoli or how to boil it, and then a couple of like orange ginger dressing or a lime cumin dressing that you can serve with your steamed broccoli. And then there are also these other kind of more complicated recipes. There's a zucchini and summer squash section, and there's a beer batter fried squash blossom recipe. And what he writes in the very beginning is, make sure you have everyone gathered in the kitchen ready to snack on the hot blossoms. Wait even 5 minutes and the blossoms will be soggy. If you have a garden and you're pulling things out of your garden, you're like, well, what do I do with this? I've already cooked like 18 different salads with tomatoes. It gives you other ideas. It also taught me about vegetables that I didn't grow up eating, something like a plantain or a malanga. So I learned about produce that I didn't grow up eating, or had some of which I had never even heard of. And what I also love about this cookbook is it's actually from a bookstore that is no longer open in Los Angeles called the Cook's Library.
Oh.
And it was this tiny little bookstore that had all these great cookbooks in it. And I still have the bookmark from it. So this is just a book that if it's not sitting on my counter, it's sitting somewhere near my kitchen, and I just thumb through it based on what I have in my fridge or what I brought home from the farmer's market.
Carrie, I love so many things about this. For one, I feel like we chose really similar books for our go-to everyday kind of cooking. And I have never heard of this book. I love these conversations because honestly, you've often brought things to the table I've literally never seen or heard of. And I love that this was just like sitting on your client's counter. It reminds me too of how I discovered Plenty, Yotama Tolengi's Plenty,
Yes.
which is also a vegetable heavy book that I love. And it was sitting on my friend's counter. It's just the way these books come into our lives and the bookstores that sell them. There's something so romantic about it. You have those memories, not just of the cooked dishes, but of the experience with the book itself. So for our next category, we're talking about entertaining. What's a cookbook we reach for when we're hosting dinner parties? Or I also thought about this as when I was cooking dinner parties for clients, because that was when I really started to dive deep into cookbooks in general. We've talked about that before when we started as personal chefs. So this I discovered when I was a personal chef. It's called At Elizabeth David's Table. It's by Elizabeth David. This particular copy, which I'll link, is a reproduction of, because her early books had no photographs, no pictures. They're extraordinarily beautifully written. Elizabeth David, I think, is one of the great food writers of all time.
Well, you gifted this book to me. I also own this
Did
book.
I gift this to you? I did remember.
You did.
Yeah. I mean, it's really something that I've gone to time and time again. And the photos are beautiful. The intro is by Ruth Reichel, so you know it's legit. I'm just going to highlight a few of the recipes that I've made for entertaining, but for my clients as well. I think overall what makes this book a classic, it's all kind of French Provençal cooking, which is actually quite simple cooking, but it's simple cooking that can feel hosting worthy, which is so great for a home cook. How can I make something that's actually not complicated, but feels special and celebratory? So there's a recipe for Piedmontese stuffed peppers. I've made that many times. It's like a marinated, beautifully stuffed pepper. That's a gorgeous starter. I've made her chicken liver pate. It's a special thing to serve to someone. This is where I learned how to make braised leeks, which is such a great side. And then there's just sort of classic braises and special braises with lamb, with brandy and garlic, or like an oxtail that's stewed with white grapes. I also love the dessert section because it's actually the simplest of all. She has things like pears baked in red wine, French chocolate cake. Right. And these are not complicated dishes, but they're crowd pleasers. They're things that guests love, that have Mediterranean flavors. You can find the ingredients at the grocery store. And it also is just one of those nice books to sit with on the couch on a Saturday afternoon with a cup of tea and sort of get inspired for Sunday cooking.
Well, what I love about this is that we definitely share a brain, because one of the books that I go to time and time again, and I've talked about this on our show before, is Mina Stone's Cooking for Artists. And
classic.
It's a classic. It's a stunning book. The pictures are really aspirational, right? You want your food to look this beautiful, but it's also very real, because there's a picture of Mina washing dishes in a yard, bent over with dish detergent in her hand. She has Greek heritage, and so there's pictures of these Greek aunties and grandmothers in their kitchen cooking, and there's something about it that just feels real. It feels old and modern at the same time. This is a place where I would go to build a menu to have people over to my house. I think actually the first recipe is vegetables with lemon juice and salt. We all know how to squeeze a lemon over some vegetables and sprinkle some salt with it, but the picture of the radishes and the mint leaves and the parsley, it's a reminder that these simple touches are actually what makes food feel really elevated.
Well, you know how much I love this book because I talked about it on one of our first favorite cookbook episodes, and you and I definitely share a mutual love. And actually, someone just wrote into us recently, and she's a personal chef, and she's catering now, and she was asking for recommendations for catering friendly recipes. And I was like, you have to get Mina Stone's Cooking for Artists, because she was a personal chef and caterer. Do you know she took all those photos herself?
I didn't know that. I hadn't clocked that piece, but that was actually something else I wanted to mention. Every section is beautiful, but her salad section is so incredible. The herb salad with feta and toasted almonds. It shows you this close-up of these tender, beautiful herbs and how you want your feta to be crumbled really fine, and that you want to use sliced almonds, which are the lightest. She's just dressing it with this lemon juice, olive oil, really light dressing, and letting all those ingredients shine rather than weighing them down.
I love her style of cooking. There are a lot of just like lemon, olive oil, simple ingredients, kind of like Elizabeth David's table. These are similar ideas of that Mediterranean style of cooking that is so hosting friendly. So our next category is an important one. Definitely we've been asked about this before. It's about home baking. What are the cookbooks you rely on? I think with baking, cookbooks are the most important because you want the recipe to work. It really sucks when you put something in the oven and it doesn't turn out, especially with baking, because you can't really fix it once it's done. So there's this amazing cookbook. I must have heard about it from another baker or even on a podcast many, many years ago, because I've had it for over a decade. But it's called Classic Home Desserts. It's by Richard Sachs. This book won a James Beard Award. It's truly one of those classic baking Bibles. Richard Sachs sadly passed away, and this is sort of this great work that he left the world. What I love about this book for baking, besides the fact that the recipes work, they're extremely reliable and well tested, is that it really spans every category of baking and desserts. So there's a whole section on custards, there's a whole section on breads, there's a whole section on breakfast bakes, cakes, cheesecakes, pies, like everything you can think of. And it's huge. It's like a real thick book. It has very few photographs, which I don't mind, because what I use this book for is really as a baking reference Bible. I'm often developing recipes. So if I'm developing something, I like to research what's been done before me and see what were the ratios they were thinking of, what were the flavors and additions. But there's definitely recipes I've made from here that are just classics and work so well. There's this wonderful, it's called Grandma's Banana Cake. And it's the kind of thing where like my neighbor asked me if I could bake his wife a banana cake. And that's where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to Richard Sachs's book. I'm going to go to Classic Home Desserts. And sure enough, there was a recipe. This is going to come up later. It has a beautiful reprinting of Edna Lewis's Sunday Night Cake, which is a simple buttery sugar cake. It's exactly what it sounds like. There's this wonderful Sephardic Jewish walnut cake with honey lemon syrup. That's a great holiday staple. There are things like a fantastic berry buckle, which is similar to our favorite berry pudding cake. There's classic tiramisu. You get the idea. These are the kinds of recipes in this book.
Well, and the kind of recipes that you want to be cooking at home. A banana cake is something everyone wants to make at home. And Sonia, I want to share a book that was gifted to me. It's called Now for Something Sweet by the Monday Morning Cooking Club. I received it maybe 5 years ago from a member of my family who's an accomplished cook and an accomplished baker herself. I honestly have barely opened it because, as you know, I don't really consider myself as much of a baker. Through my friendship with you, I've become more adventurous with my baking. I've recently been baking out of Nicole Rucker's cookbook that opened up this path of, okay, I've been making banana bread and I've been making pies. And so now what are the other things that I want to make? And I've gone through this cookbook. I've made a couple of recipes. The first recipe I made, it's a coconut. It's basically like a granola bar. It's with coconut and oatmeal and a lot of butter. And it's called crunchies.
I love it because it's like your favorite word.
It's my favorite word. It's my favorite texture. It's very buttery. I went through and kind of marked all the different things that I want to make out of it. But there's a coconut and passion fruit slab cake.
Ooh.
There's a Florentine tart, which is circular in shape, and you cut it into long, skinny wedges, and it's full of almonds and dried apricots and dark chocolate and orange marmalade and a little bit of that Grand Marnier. There's also a recipe for espresso prunes with sugar and brandy.
Oh, that's up my alley.
What's great about it is this group of women who live in Sydney, Australia. They sort of cook Aussie and Jewish style. And this is, I think, their second cookbook. They did a more savory one, too. They're called the Monday Morning Cooking Club.
Yeah, I've also never heard of this cookbook before. And I feel like that happens every time we talk about cookbooks, which is truly shocking to me because you kind of think everyone knows the same books, but we don't. Okay, so on that topic, though, this might be one that a lot of people know. In the category of most reliable, I think this is an extremely important category. There are certain cookbooks that you just know every single recipe is going to work and taste good and be worth the investment of your time and your ingredients. I don't blame people for when a recipe sometimes goes astray, but there are just recipe developers that are on another level. And you know, for me, my person who gave me the confidence to start baking and bake well was Deb Perlman of Smitten Kitchen. Her blog became successful around the time when I started personal chefing, and I just knew I could serve my clients something that I never made before if it was her recipe. So her first cookbook, she has 3 of them now. Her first cookbook is my favorite. It's called the Smitten Kitchen Cookbook. It's just one of those go-tos that I keep reaching for when I actually want to follow a recipe or need to follow a recipe. I've made the squash and onion galette, which was incredible. I've made the white bean pot pie, which was delicious. She has some simple things like a parsnip puree, which is something I love to make with like a brisket. Or in her case, she gives you a really good braised short ribs recipe. Her rugelach recipe is really similar to mine, and I think it's excellent. Oh, this is one of the things I've made so many times I can't even count. She has this recipe for roast chicken and grapes with olives and rosemaries.
You've shared that idea a couple of times, but it's interesting when you go back and you realize where it came from.
Yes, I forgot.
It becomes you.
Yeah,
right?
I make it all the time. I make my own modifications, but the first time I made it, it was exactly as written.
Yeah.
And then she has classic things like cakes and lemon bars. I just think Deb Perlman truly is at the top of the list of recipe developers on the planet. We're so lucky she shares her recipes.
But that's what a good writer does, is that they give you the knowledge that they have and they teach it to you in a way that it becomes your own. Because the idea of roasted chicken with grapes and leeks, I think of that with you. That's where I learned that idea. But it's like it came from her and someone taught that to her. And so that's what I think is so special about sharing cookbooks and hearing what another cook is cooking in his or her kitchen. Well, Sonia, the book that I want to share that is my most reliable and most consistent is Barefoot Contessa at Home. And similar to you, that book came out when I was working as a personal chef. I feel like it was in all of my clients' kitchens. As I was looking back through the recipes, I looked through the section with all the sandwiches, and I could just see like all of my catering menus.
Wow.
There's like a Caesar club sandwich and a chicken salad sandwich and smoked salmon and egg salad tartines and goat cheese sandwiches that inspired so many catered lunches. I cater for 2 different offices. I've made the fresh pea soup, and there's a picture of the broth in a deli cup, like the homemade broth that she makes, and talks about how in all of her recipes, she says 4 cups of broth, preferably homemade. I really think it's those suggestions that pushed me forward with making broth, because also at that time, I was just roasting so much chicken for those lunches. I had all these bones, and I was like, oh, I should do something with these. And that's kind of what led me into making broth. This cookbook in particular, it was after she wrote the Barefoot Contessa cookbook, which was really all about her restaurants in the Hamptons. These are her recipes that are for home cooking. And that's all I did was I cooked in people's homes and I catered these lunches.
Yeah, I mean, that easily could have been on my list. I love that cookbook so much. I had no idea that your sandwiches were inspired by that book. I love learning that this is where these inspirations came from because I honestly didn't know that. And Carrie, I think I actually went to Ina when I was catering a big lunch for someone, kind of the same way that you did. She has every recipe tested by multiple people, and she actually uses her own recipes when she makes things. Like, she truly measures out the salt and the sugar and the oil because she said publicly before, once I've spent all that time to get a recipe right, I want to keep making it. And so I think you're so right to bring this to the reliable category. There's few people as reliable as her.
Besides all the sandwiches that really inspired catering for office clients, I was looking through this section of vegetables, and there's so many vegetables that became my signatures in my kitchen. The honey orange carrots that I used to cook for kids, broccoli and balsamic with garlic, and broccoli rabe with garlic. But one of the things that I found hilarious as I was going through there is I used to make the jalapeno cheddar cornbread because the pages are so messed up. But that is in the vegetable category. In the section on vegetables, it's jalapeno cheddar cornbread. And that's something I love so much about Ina. She just slotted that in there.
That's really sweet. I think reliable is a perfect segue into our next category, which is an essential classic cookbook. I think we often are all sort of enamored with what's new and what just comes out, but there's a reason certain cookbooks become classics, and that inform all the cookbooks that came after them. And so there's this cookbook I've had since I was a teenager. It's a very famous cookbook by Edna Lewis called The Taste of Country Cooking. It's a classic. Edna Lewis was an extraordinary chef who had a restaurant in New York City and was discovered by Judith Butler, this incredible editor at Knopf. The book, The Editor, by the way, is one of the best books I've ever read in my life, and it's about Judith, so I highly recommend it. But I recently, after reading The Editor, I revisited the Edna Lewis cookbook that I've had forever, and I was like, this is one of the most beautifully written cookbooks that I've ever read. This book is about a way of life. It's divided into seasons, and then it's divided into menus. So she's not just telling you recipes, she's telling you how to weave meals for particular times of year and particular moments in the year. So she has this one recipe for dandelion blossom wine. So she writes, very early in spring, when new green grass blanketed the countryside, suddenly it would be dotted over with the golden blossoms of the dandelion plant. The neighbors would be seen out early in the morning before breakfast picking the golden blossoms. For winemaking, the blossoms must be picked before noon.
It's so beautiful.
I mean, it's gorgeous. And our yard is often dotted with dandelions. We think of them as weeds, and I don't think of them as weeds. I think of how would Edna Lewis use all these blossoms. But there's many, many useful recipes in this book, although I also recommend it just for a good sit-down read. But I've made the watermelon rind pickles, strawberry preserves. She has this lovely spring salad of purslane, tender beet tops, and lamb's quarters. Also things people don't typically use. Sometimes they're thought of as weeds. And then there's also lovely classics like Parker house rolls, spoon bread, cobblers. I just love this book so much.
Well, I really love that you described it as a way of life, because the book that I'm bringing to this conversation is The Enchanted Broccoli Forest by Molly Katzen. And it's a book that I discovered when I was already a personal chef, and I have a used copy. I found it at a used bookstore. There's just something about even the cover that calls to you. And what I love about it is that it's like a book that your artist friend wrote for you, because it's all in her handwriting. The way she writes her recipes is so beautiful. And I think part of what it helped me do is bridge the gap between where I came from and where I was cooking. This idea that casseroles are something that is elevated and that bread baking is a way of life. The way she talks about cooking is so essential because it calls back to a time when people did everything themselves. And it also acknowledges that sometimes you just need a casserole to get on the table, and that a simple soup can be a really special moment in your day.
It's such a classic. You described it so well. It really does feel like your artist friend made this for you and it comes from her home kitchen and she's just gifted you with this treasure trove of recipes. I think Molly Katzen doesn't get enough credit for how much she's shaped vegetarian cooking in the country.
Well, I think what she does is she translates eating seasonally, taking really beautiful ingredients and treating it simply and making something really spectacular out of it.
Yeah. So another question we get asked a lot about is like what cookbook to gift someone. And you and I both love gifting cookbooks. The one I've been reaching for lately is something I've talked about here before, which is Tender Heart by Hetty Louise McKinnon. I think it's just a wonderful book, especially for friends who like to eat a lot of vegetables like we seemingly do. But I do think even for meat eaters, this is a great book. She makes vegetables so exciting. The recipes are so well written. I've been making the one pot baked smoky eggplant and lentils with feta. I love the carrot and cannellini bean sheet pan meal. You know how much I love the cheesy kale and rice cake bake. It's Korean inspired, but so vegetable heavy. And of course, the spinach and mint ruffled milk pie. And it's also a stunning book.
Well, I think this is one of those cooking club darlings. I still don't own this book, but every time I hear you talk about it, and I have cooked the ruffled milk pie, I've cooked some of these recipes that you've brought to the table. And I think everyone is trying to eat more vegetables. And when you hear of someone making vegetables exciting, it's a great thing to share with another home cook. Well, Sonia, the book that I have gifted the most, besides your cookbook, is Indianish by Priya Krishna. Part of why I have gifted this to so many friends, including you, including my friend Maylin, is because I love Indian food and I want to cook it more. And I also did it as an invitation to have my friends help me learn some of these recipes. And the truth is that I haven't quite gone down this road yet.
Well, Carrie, you know how I feel about you starting a cookbook club. And it seems like this could be an easy first contender for the club.
It really could.
You gifted this book to me. It's beautiful. And I have not cooked from it enough either. So we do really need to start trying out some recipes from the book. And I have been cooking more Indian food this year for a myriad of reasons, and partly because I just love it like you do. It's a very fun cookbook. I understand why you gift it to people. The pictures are so colorful. The recipes sound so delicious. It's a really great book.
Priya is a first-generation Indian American, very much like my close friend Jamie. The way she talks about making the things that the aunties made and the grandmas made and your mom made. I love Indian food and I've eaten a lot of Indian food, but I want to cook it myself. So this is definitely on my project list.
I love that. It's really hard to narrow down this list. You and I probably have dozens of other cookbooks we want to share today. I think we should end with one that's sort of unique or inspiring. And one of my greatest finds of all time is a book called Frida's Feast. And it's a cookbook of Frida Kahlo's recipes.
Really?
Yes, it's collected by Guadalupe Rivera, the daughter of Diego Rivera. Frida Kahlo was married to Diego Rivera. She was a really avid home cook, and she would create these incredible dinner parties, incredible feasts. The book is so stunning. The pictures are gorgeous, and it's also one of those books that's divided a little bit like Edna Lewis's book, by seasons and by menus. So you have the menu first and then all the recipes. And of course, there's things like flautas and like a lovely black bean soup. And then there's like really interesting recipes like limes filled with shredded coconut. Things that I've never seen before that are just so enticing. If you're kind of an art lover, which I am, this is definitely a fun thing to find. And there are copies out there. I think I was looking at my book and the sticker said $15.
It gives you a glimpse into someone's life, someone that we know through her art. But to think about her cooking in her kitchen is such a beautiful idea. Well, Sonia, one of my favorite cookbooks in my collection is the Dooky Chase cookbook by Leah Chase. I bought this cookbook in New Orleans at Dooky Chase. I went there for lunch with a group of friends.
Carrie, I don't know what Dooky Chase is. Can you tell me?
So Dooky Chase is a very famous restaurant in New Orleans. It's one of those institutions. I went there in the early 2010s, and Leah Chase was already in her late 80s. She was walking around the dining room that day when we were eating our lunch, and she came by our table to say hello to us, and she bent down and picked up my purse from the floor, sitting on the floor, and she says, "Darlin', if you leave your purse on the floor, all your money will fall out. And my friend was sitting there. We were both laughing. It was not, nice to meet you, Mrs. Chase. Our lunch there was really incredible. And it was this really beautiful, important restaurant. What I love about this cookbook is that it reminds me of my time in New Orleans and my time with my friends there. She signed the book, which is also really special. It says, to Carrie, enjoy life with good food and great friends. Grateful for you, Leah Chase. I mean,
wow,
what a beautiful...
What an amazing inscription for someone who you just met. I think it also speaks to, again, not every cookbook is for following the recipes. Some cookbooks you buy to honor the place, to remember the people you were with.
Absolutely.
Well, there's so many more cookbooks that we could talk about, so I'm sure we'll have to revisit this conversation again in the future.
But until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating!